and welcome back to the Daily Wrap. I'm Rick Unger, joined by my co-host for the evening, Heather Hansen, also filling out the panel, Noel Nickpour and Bill Tucker. Welcome, guys. Nice to have you here tonight.
Thanks.
In the wake of the tragic shooting in South Carolina, the question which appears to have garnered the most attention is whether or not the Confederate battle flag currently being flown on the Capitol grounds of the state should be removed once and for all. While Democratic candidates for president moved fairly quickly to call for its removal, Republican candidates have been a bit slower to the punch. Interestingly, it took former Massachusetts governor and 2012 GOP presidential candidate Mitt Romney to get the ball rolling with his party. In a tweet, Romney implored, "Take down the Confederate flag at the South Carolina Capitol. To many, it is a symbol of racial hatred. Remove it now to honor Charleston victims." Well, today, South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley, backed up by a large group of both Republican and Democratic elected officials, including U.S. Senators Tim Scott and Lindsey Graham, along with Democratic House Assistant Minority Leader James Clyburn, answered that call.
15 years ago, after much contentious debate, South Carolina came together in a bipartisan way to move the flag from atop the Capitol dome. Today, we are here in a moment of unity in our state, without ill will, to say it's time to move the flag from the Capitol grounds.
While Governor Haley may have finally seen the light on this, other members of the GOP remained somewhat hesitant to pick a side as visions of that all-important South Carolina primary dances in their heads.
I don't know that issue. It's an issue that South Carolina needs to deal with, and again, I don't know all the complexities of how that was decided.
The people of South Carolina reached an agreement of what should be done down there, and I'm sure they're going to have a lot more discussions.
Those are decisions best made at the state level.
That's a decision for the people of South Carolina.
Now is the time to grieve and mourn for those who have been lost. The entire country is now standing shoulder to shoulder with the minority community, the African American community in South Carolina, and God bless them.
So, Heather, let's get to the issue. Now, I understand that there are people in South Carolina who view that flag as a memorial to ancestors who may have fought and died in the Civil War. But aren't we at a point where this has become a no-brainer?
Absolutely. And listen, if you want to say it's up to the state, that's fine, as long as you don't put a period there and instead say, and I think they should take it down. Because I think that it's pretty darn clear that that's what has to happen. I think that the visual of having that flag fly when the American flags were at half-staff was one that most of the American population could not stand by. And fortunately, the people there in South Carolina once again have shown us how to do the right thing and have made the right decision. I have to say that the example that they have shown throughout these tragedies has been an amazing one.
Nora, what's your take on this?
Oh my gosh, it's everybody's take. Nobody thinks that that flag should stay and be a symbol of the state. How embarrassing! It should have come down. It should have come down long ago. It is a historical artifact. It needs to be in a museum. It needs to be, you know, where historical things. It needs to be at the National Library of Congress. It needs to be somewhere where it's not a symbol of what the state represents.
So, Bill, you know what I find curious about this is it took this horrible, horrible thing to happen to take the direction of having this conversation, right? I mean, I suppose what happens here is everybody looks for something good to come out of a terrible situation. There's not going to be any movement on guns. We all know that, whether you think there should be or shouldn't be. Is that what's happening here? Why wasn't this conversation going on 2 weeks before the tragedy?
There's a lot of things good coming out of this. None of it has to do with the flag. That flag's silly, it's stupid, and I say that as a guy who's born in Mississippi and had relatives fight on the Confederate side, okay? So that flag's stupid. What they do with it is South Carolina's business. They've made their decision. I'm glad they made the decision they made. But it's a distraction because we're talking about a stupid flag. We are not talking about race relations in this country. We're not talking about the Unity Walk. We're not talking about the action that moved me to tears over the weekend when those church members came together and said, enough of this. We've had enough hate. We've seen what hate does. That's the conversation we should be having. That's a silly
What do you think?
Flag.
It's interesting. I always feel the need to point out things that make it a fair conversation. Do you know that when Bill Clinton ran for president, that there were at least two campaign pins, because I own them both, that are Confederate flags with his picture and Gore's picture. On one of them, they're dressed in gray.
Yeah, I did know that, but I think that as times change, people change, and this is something that we are hopefully moving past. And I think that the fact that people have come together in a bipartisan way, I don't think that that would have happened but for this.
But not everybody's come together. Let's focus for a second on former Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee, who has said that the Confederate flag is not an issue for 2016. But with the current problems surrounding race and the number of prominent Republicans supporting its removal from the state grounds, is Huckabee just flat out wrong?
I think that what happens with the Republicans is they don't know what to do with these social issues, and the big
Unless
issues.
they're very clear. In other words, Huckabee has no problem telling you what he thinks about gay marriage and how we should ignore the Supreme Court if they rule the wrong way, in his opinion. But suddenly on this one, it's not an issue.
Yeah, I think that it's a cop-out to say that symbols are important. We see that with the Mohammed issue that we've seen across the country and across the world. Symbols are very important to people, and this has been a symbol of a lot of nastiness in our country, and it's time for it to go away. And if Huckabee can't see that, he's going to have a disadvantage in the general election for sure.
Bill?
I'm ill-equipped.
You're speechless.
No, I am. I'm ill-equipped to
You're
talk about Mike
speechless.
Huckabee. I know him. I've met him several times. I've spoken with him, and I've got relatives who lobbied him when he was governor in Arkansas. And I don't align myself with anything Mike Huckabee has to say. And to one degree, he's right.
Well,
but the real issue is the race.
I'll tell you what, I'm going to give you a chance to talk about this some more, because we're going to deal with this a little bit later. But coming up next, some underdogs are gaining momentum in the Republican race to the White House. We'll tell you who, but only if you stay tuned.